In last episode, we have explored the north inner Deshou Palace, and today I will show you the real political center of ancient Hangzhou, Fenghuang Mountain. Come out from the Houchaomen metro station, I came across a group of hiking people. Houchao Gate is actually a major gate of the outer city. Houchao means waiting for the tide, so we can see it's quite close to the Qiantang River in ancient time. But what we're gonna explore today is the inner city, which is the palace of the South Song dynasty. We are walking through the Liubuqiao Zhijie. It's a normal and narrow street, but these ancient officials had to pass when they enter the court. Let's take a look at the location of ancient palace. It's in the south of Hangzhou, at the foothill of Fenghuang Mountain, though there is basically no remains on the ground today. Archaeologists have found several ruins of walls. It shows the extent of the ancient palace. Combined with the history record, we can recover the basic image of the palace. By walking through the street of this neighborhood, you still have a strong feeling of the lost prosperity. According to the historical records, the South Song Imperial Palace had several major gates, and the northern one was called Hening Gate. There is something quite unusual about this gate. In traditional Chinese palace design, the palace normally sits in the north and faces south. Because of the geography of Fenghuang Mountain, the palace was built on the southern side of the city, facing north. So the royal family had little choice but to make the northern gate one of the main entrances. And this is where we are standing now, outside Hening Gate. This road, known as the Fenghuang Mountain Foothill Road, once runs through the heart of the Imperial Palace. Of course, there is almost nothing left to the palace today. So standing here, you have to use a little imagination. Try to picture the house, gates, courtyard, and buildings that once stood along this road, the center of the power of the South Song dynasty. At first, this was hardly what you would expect from an imperial palace. The Southern Song court had moved south in a hurry, and this was still in many ways a government in exile. The earliest palace buildings were surprisingly crude. There weren't even covered corridors to protect officials from the rain. When the weather turned bad, officials still had to make their way through the palace grounds, walking through wet and muddy paths to attend court. It must have been a rather miserable experience for an emperor's court. And because resources were limited, these buildings were not designed for just one purpose. The same hall could serve different functions on different occasions, and even be given different names depending on how it was being used. But things gradually began to change. In year 1138, after negotiation with the Jin regime, the war eased somewhat, giving Emperor Gaozong a little more room to think beyond survival. He began investing more heavily in the construction of the palace. Around the same time, the Jin released Gaozong's mother, the empress daughter Wei, who had been held in the north for years. Gaozong built a new palace for her, Ciling Palace, and gradually more and more buildings appeared around it. The imperial ancestral and the state ritual temples, the Empress Palace, the Imperial School, ritual buildings, Daqing Hall, Cuigong Hall. One by one, these buildings transferred what had been a makeshift court into something that finally looked like an imperial capital. Walking through this neighborhood is still an amazing experience for me. You can come across the old lifestyle of the local people. Now we are going to walk up the hill. And the first thing I want to see is the stone pillar from Fantian Temple. The temple was originally built during the Wuyue Kingdom. We could still see much of the temple as recently as the last century. But today, only these two stone pillars remain. And honestly, they're pretty incredible. Look closely, you'll see that the pillar is made up of layer upon layer of intricate carvings, almost like a miniature Buddhist world. The inscriptions were carved during the reign of the last king of Wuyue. You'll find Buddhist scriptures and the image of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, along with carvings that imitate the wooden structures of a Buddhist temple. Now, let's leave this pillar behind and take a short hike up the hill to see what remains inside the hill. Qiyun Temple, once a royal temple of the Southern Dynasty. As I walk through the gate, I can already hear chanting. It turns out there is a private Buddhist ritual going on inside. It's surprisingly small. There is only one main hall, and the most of what you see here is much more recent. There is no crowds here. The monks grow their own vegetables in the garden, and a few stray dogs wander around the temple. There isn't much more incense burning either. It's a completely different atmosphere, and somehow it makes this place feel even more peaceful. This group of rocks is known as Moonstone. It was once part of the royal garden of the Southern Dynasty, and was a famous place for the imperial family to admire the full moon. Every Mid-Autumn festival, the royal family would come here to enjoy the moonlight. When the moon was high in the sky, the light would pass through a natural opening in the rock and fall onto the pond below. The reflection on the water created a small, carefully framed wheel of the moon. Walking towards the west, there is even a more mysterious temple here, Shengguo Temple. It was built in Tang Dynasty but was abandoned and destroyed several times later. The sculpture here is 3 cents and was carved during Wei Kingdom, but it's hard to find access. Now we have reached a small platform called Jiangtai Mountain. This was once a place where soldiers were stationed. Look around you, you'll notice that the landscape here is quite similar to Moonstone, the same kind of exposed rock rising from the hillside. There are also several inscriptions carved into the stone. Now we are going to walk down here. There are 2 major archaeological sites on Fenghua Mountain related to the Southern Quartz Imperial kilns. One was built higher up on the mountain, while the other was located at the foot of the hill. The one we are heading to now has been turned into a museum, the Southern Guan Kiln Museum. So why did the Southern Court establish an imperial kiln here in the first place? One important reason was to produce ritual vessels for the imperial court. In ancient China, there was an old saying, the great affairs of the state are sacrifices and warfare. So ritual vessels were not simply objects for religious ceremonies, they were part of the system of an imperial power. But what makes Southern Guan well particularly interesting is not just what it was used for, but how it was made. The clay body was made from a combination of porcelain stone and zijin clay. The zijin clay increased the level of aluminum and iron in the clay body, making the finished porcelain stronger and more durable. The glaze was also specially formulated with more alkaline elements. This made the glaze more viscous, allowing craftsmen to apply multiple layers and fire the vessels rapidly. The result was a distinctive guanwell, a relatively thin body covered by a thick, smooth glaze with a softer, almost jade-like appearance. 76, the Mongols conquered Hangzhou, and the Southern Palace was burned down. The imperial city disappeared. Today, almost nothing remains, just the fragments of stone carvings, porcelains, and fell traces scattered across the hills, making the whole process like exploring. You never know what you will find in next corner.